But I think when we're thinking about the big use cases in AI, what are those big emerging trends?
Why would you, as a tech company planning to use AI, care about this? The answer is simple: huge fines.
Welcome to episode 4 of the Generation AI podcast, where every week we break down the latest trends, tools, and strategies in AI. So if you're building with AI and you're looking to separate the signal from the noise, this is the podcast for you. In the first half of this episode, we're going to be focusing on two things: the AI agent coding wars and the ethics in AI regulation, and particularly the new regulations brought out by the EU governing AI. Mihai, what are we going to be focusing on the second half of today's podcast?
We'll go back to agents and we'll speak about how no one really knows what agents are and how people have different definitions of what an AI agent is. And then we'll go back to a broader question on how to keep up with the advancements in AI in the light of the newest model from Google, Gemma 3, and we'll also go through what this model is capable of.
Amazing.
So let's dive in the first topic.
Absolutely.
Why do you feel we're in an AI agent coding war?
Well, it's interesting, right? I mean, I think I'm particularly hyped about today's episode because what we see, we've got these emerging trends. We've got these emerging trends in AI. Agentic AI is obviously a big trend. Regulation is obviously, I mean, like every emerging technology, right? Every piece of regulation always runs behind the technology, and the regulators are always trying to play catch up. But I think when we're thinking about the big use cases in AI, what are those big emerging trends? I think it's pretty clear now that the biggest emerging trend in terms of enterprise AI adoption is going to be AI coders and AI coding agents. Because if you're looking at where Silicon Valley is placing their money, it's in AI coding agents. So first we had Cursor, and now we have Reflection AI that have just raised their Series A. So Reflection.ai were founded by DeepMind and OpenAI researchers. So basically the two biggest companies in AI over the last 10 years, right? So DeepMind, if anyone doesn't know who DeepMind are, DeepMind were acquired by Google. They were the first company to build really large-scale neural nets for AI, started by Mustafa Suleyman and others, and again, acquired by Google, and really are the frontier of AI for the last 10 years. Obviously, OpenAI, everyone knows who they are, founded by Sam Altman, started off as a charity, controversially are now turning into a for-profit, but have the world's most used large language model in terms of ChatGPT. And now we have the researchers coming from these two companies and actually building their own company and essentially building a coding agent to rival Cursor, raising $130 million Series A. And so when you look at who's who's backing this company, I think Sequoia are behind them. And so when you look at where the VCs, and this is, I suppose, the main point of this topic, right, is that if you're trying to take a bet on the big use case in AI and what that's going to be, look at where Andreessen, Sequoia, the big Silicon Valley VCs are putting their money. And increasingly, it seems to be that the big bet they're taking is in these coding agents. But as a coder yourself, as a developer yourself, keen to get your take on where you think this is heading and what your perception is of
For sure.
the race.
I think we should take a step back and explain for those two people in the audience who still don't know what a coding agent is. It's basically a large language model fine-tuned on code that has a task to write code that works in production, pretty much how an engineer is trained, how a coder is trained. Looking back at what you said about on the comparison between Cursor and Reflection AI, even though they might seem similar, they're kind of different. Cursor is a developer tool. It's a tool that I use to write code faster, and it helps me to write code while I do it. While Reflection AI can do that, but it's not its main purpose. The purpose of Reflection AI is to write code while you sleep, to write code while you're in meetings, while you do planning and other types of tasks. The goal of this kind of tools is to go through your backlog and proactively write code before you even think about it. And I can see a future where I'm writing my code, I'm building the important features, and there's a few agents behind me who take care of the boring things in the backlog, like logging, cleaning code, security, this kind of small things that have been left at the bottom of the backlog just because no one wants to pick them up.
I mean, I find it fascinating because you're right to draw that distinction, right? Like Cursor is there to help you be a more productive coder, and Reflection.ai is there to write the code that you may not want to write, so that you can spend your time writing the valuable code that is actually going to make a meaningful difference to the end user experience. I mean, already we've gone from having AI coders to specific niches within the AI coding landscape. I mean, what do you see the evolution of this being? If I was to transport you into 5 years from now and say, okay, you've woken up in the morning, you've opened your laptop, assuming you're still using one, what does a developer's org chart look like in 5 years' time?
5 years seems like a crazy amount of time, given that the last 2 years brought so many transformations in this industry and many more industries. But let's just look in the mid to long term future. I think the developer role, the traditional developer role, will turn more into a product engineer role. A person who can still code, but more than that, a person who can write good specs for a product. Because the person will still code the important features, but more importantly, it will direct AI agents or teams of AI agents to build other features. And we've talked before about how the coder role turns more into the manager of a team of AI agents role. And I think we'll see this trend more and more, where only coders will become product engineers / coders.
That's a really interesting take. But what I'm interested to understand as well is that, what do you think the stack looks like? Because already we have like an emerging stack appearing where you've got Cursor for some use cases, you've got Reflection.ai for others. Is that going to be, a multi-agent workflow where it's agent to agent, and actually you're just going to be checking that workflow? I mean, how is this going to work in practice?
I think we're looking at a spectrum here where on one end you have Cursor that's meant to actively help developers write code. And on the other end, you have tools like Lovable that involve no coding and only natural language that turns into products. And somewhere in the middle, we have tools like Reflection AI that are not no code tools, and they're also not just coding assistants. They're, let's say, a more proactive approach to writing code. So you asked me about the stack. This can mean many things for sure, but I think the stack would be that you still code the important features half of the time, and half of the time you define the other important features. And this team of agents, you'll be coordinating it in a way that when you wake up the next day, you already have some pull requests. In our words, this is basically changes to the code base already prepared by the agents, and you would just go over them, review them, and maybe you'd have multiple types of agents. You have coder agents and you have reviewer agents that work with each other in a reinforcing way to improve the code that's being delivered to you as a software engineer. So I can see different types of teams of AI agents, and we keep adding layers and layers on top of this every episode just because the industry moves so fast. But I'll see kind of a cooperation between humans, AI coders, AI reviewers, AI testers, and so on.
I also think that there's just so many, and this is like a whole nother topic that we won't dive into it too deeply now. But like, I always think about the Netflix and the Blockbuster example, right? If you think about, I remember going into a Blockbuster store in the early 2000s, and picking up a physical video to go out and rent. And the technology was already there to completely destroy that business model for years. And yet we were still going into the video store, picking up our physical video and taking it home, and then bringing it back the next day once we've watched our movie. And I just think that what we're seeing right now is a kind of overlap whereby you have the technology that's there now to destroy business models. I think there's so many zombie business models right now that will be destroyed by what we're seeing. I have no idea what comes next, but I just feel like we're now tipping into a bit of inflection point, particularly in the coding space, where there's a massive amount of risk for incumbents and a massive amount of opportunity for new entrants.
For sure, and we spoke before on the podcast about this, that the purpose of AI is not to replace people, but to augment what people are doing. However, if you as an engineer only know how to code or only know a single programming language, you'll be easily replaced. However, if you choose to learn how to manage agents and how to step on this opportunity, I think you'll be shielded from the whole idea that AI will replace people. And the
Feel
same
free.
goes with your blockbuster example, right? Good movie studios took advantage of the tech at the time and moved online.
Well, Netflix is the best example. Netflix used to send you, everyone forgets this, but Netflix used to send you DVDs in the post. That was
Exactly.
their original business model. And I'm very interested to understand, and this is putting you on the spot, so apologies in advance. But let's say, for instance, you were designing a software development agency today, and you wanted to go to market with an AI first software development agency. How would you structure it? What would you do based on the tools we have available today?
It's an interesting discussion because everybody that's non-technical thinks that AI agents will take over the world, and AI agents are already very good at what they're doing. But as we've tested a few days ago, tools like Crew AI, what was that, Relevance AI, and other, let's say, no-code integration tools, based on their marketing, they should be great. When we sat down and tried to build things, they weren't that great. So I think currently we're still in a bubble where the marketing is very high. The actual capability is lagging behind, of course, catching up quite fast, but it's not at the same level as the marketing being made. To get back to your question on how I would structure an AI first coding agency, I would not rule out the idea that we need people for sure. So I'm not an advocate
Sure.
of let's replace people with AI.
Yeah.
Instead, I would hire people that have significantly more skills than coding, that have communication skills, question answering skills, product skills. Because if you look at how AI agents work in the coding area, the better you are prompting them, the better the product and the result that comes out of their workflow. So the more you know how to communicate things clearly to an AI agent, the higher quality the code will be and the higher the likelihood that the code will actually work as you intend. So I think communication is, and this goes without saying, right, a skill that will allow you to use these emerging technologies as well as possible. What
Yeah.
would you do if you would build an AI first coding
I mean,
agency?
I'm not a developer, right? But I think people are still trying to work out. I think everyone with a brain understands that we're not AI only. That would be terrible. It would produce terrible solutions. But neither are we in a space where we are human only, because you now have the opportunity to be much more productive by incorporating AI. But I think we're still trying to work out what is the correct combination of human plus AI. Like, for instance, let's say we start a software development agency tomorrow, and a fintech company wants us to build a consumer facing application for trading. and we say, okay, fine. Now, 10 years ago, that would have been, okay, let's get a team of 30 software developers on this. We need front end guys, we need back end guys, we need some people that understand the full stack. But essentially, we need 30 humans to go away and build this end to end trading platform. Now, we would say, okay, well, we probably need 20 software developers or 25 software developers, and we need a bunch of AI software development tools like Cursor, like Reflection AI. But I think most companies would still not understand, okay, this is what we're going to use Cursor AI to build. This is what we're going to need a developer to build. This is what we're going to need 50-50 AI plus coder to build. And I think the companies that work out what that balance is first will have a massive advantage, but I have no idea what that looks like right now, to be honest.
They will win for sure. And just as a side note, as an engineer, I talk with many founders and many coders, and you'd be surprised how much we are in a bubble where we see all these tools. We think that we can achieve so many things with the tools, but people, many coders, still do things the very old way. I know people who still don't use Cursor and Copilot, and even just integrating these simple tools in their workflow will make them, we often hear 10x more productive, probably not 10x more productive, but significantly more productive.
And what's
So even the integration of simple things can get you quite far.
So just maybe to close off this topic, I know we've been on this for a while, but it's interesting to get your perspective. These coders that are not using Cursor or not using any AI tools, are they people that are still renting from Blockbuster in 2005, or are they people that are not buying into the bubble?
I would say neither of those two. I would say maybe people that are regulated by their employers not to use this kind of tools because there's a lack of trust and transparency of where their code IP is going. Mm-hmm. And maybe people that are also the type of people that are going to the shop to rent a movie.
Yeah.
Like late adopters. But I would say there's still a lack of trust of where your data and IP is going. I think this leads us to the next topic of how can we regulate AI in a way that doesn't slow down progress, but put some practices in place so that your data is safe and the use cases of AI are also safe. And this leads us to the European AI Act. This has been around for a while. And for people who don't know what this is, it's basically an initiative of European countries to regulate what can be done with AI, what data is used with AI, all with the shared goal of transparency, of making AI more transparent and helping both AI builders and AI consumers to feel more safe that their data is used properly. And why would you care about this topic? And why would you, as a tech company planning to use AI, care about this? The answer is simple: huge fines of up to 10% of your annual revenue. And complying is quite straightforward and not very pricey, but the cost of not complying is crazy high. To quickly introduce the European AI Act, it basically splits the use cases of AI in 4 big categories. Prohibited AI, think of social scoring systems and very detrimental uses of AI. High-risk AI, you can think of self-driving cars and, let's say, AI used in healthcare, as in autonomous surgery and this kind of things. Then you have middle risk AI. You can think of all the foundation models being classified as mid-risk AI, and low-risk AI, you can think of spam filters. The goal of the AI Act, is to prohibit uses of very dangerous AI and limit and increase the transparency of the high-risk AI. Long story short, as an engineer, and I'm keen to hear your thoughts in a bit. As an engineer, I never design for regulations. I always build AI that's clean and transparent since day one. And the fact that I comply with the regulations is just a cause, not a straightforward goal. I'm curious what you think from a non-tech perspective. Do you think that will be behind the US, or do you think this will hinder innovation? What's your thought on this kind of regulations?
I mean, to be honest, I think the non-tech perspective and the tech perspective are the same thing here. Like it's just classic EU, isn't it? Um, let's focus less on regulating it and let's focus more on building it. I mean, I think if you look at, to take a slightly broader perspective, if you look at the most of the European economies at the moment, Europe is stagnating. Europe has had low to no growth since the financial crisis, which was, all the way back in 2008. A quick stat for you. I think post 2008, around 2010, the US economy and the European economy were roughly the same size. Today, the US is double the size economy versus Europe. And the fact that the EU are bringing out regulations to regulate AI rather than bringing out regulations to make sure that we build AI companies is just symbolic of the problem in my view. So I don't know if I can be any clearer than that, but I think the EU need to focus less on regulation and more on innovation, in my humble opinion.
I have a slightly different take here. So we know the saying that EU is fast to regulate and slow to innovate. I don't think the lack of speed of innovation is 100% linked to regulations. It might also be mindset. It might also be risk adversity of people in the EU. And it might also be funding, right? You cannot really compare New York and San Francisco with the European market when it comes to VCs throwing money at startups to increase their chances of growth.
But I think the thing that links this regulation aspect and the funding aspect is mentality. I think mentality is the issue. I think there is a trend towards risk aversion in Europe, and this is why we seek to regulate rather than to finance in the way the Americans do. And I think I think the risk of over-regulating for our economies is greater than the risk of under-regulating for our freedom. I think that the biggest threat to Europeans right now is not AI. The biggest threat to Europeans right now is a stagnating economy. And so AI is a amazing opportunity for Europe because we have some of the best universities with some of the best machine learning engineering talent in the world in Europe, and we should be seeking to take advantage of that and introduce regulation to make financing and funding more easy. Make it easier for machine learning engineers that are in Europe to build companies that are using AI. I think this is completely the wrong approach, but I think sooner or later they're going to be forced to do something a bit more innovative, right? Because I don't think Europeans will put up with another 10 years of stagnation. So I think this will resolve itself in time.
Understood. Here's my take on this European AI Act. I think this will hit big companies that have been doing AI for a long time without designing with first principles in mind. I don't think this will hit startups and emerging companies because let's pick the obvious example we've mentioned 100 times on the podcast so far, Lovable, right? They're Sweden-based. They have to respect these regulations, and yet we've seen crazy growth from Europe. So I think the bottom line here is that good engineers will find a way to, and I want to avoid using the word go around the regulations, but build with solid principles in mind so that regulations are met without hindering performance and growth. So I think solid teams will find a way to be in line with the regulations without losing ground compared to the US.
Yeah,
Speaking
absolutely.
of this kind of topics,
Let's
what's
move
an
it
AI
on
agent?
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So this is a really interesting article that came out in TechCrunch this week, and the title of the article, and we'll bring it up in the show notes and for the audience. But the title of the article is "No One Knows What the Hell an AI Agent Is," and I think it's so poignant because this year, 2025, was marked as the year of the AI agent, right? Whether it's Microsoft saying that AI agents are going to replace knowledge workers, or that OpenAI's Sam Altman said that this is the year that AI agents are going to join the workforce. For anyone that has a kind of BS radar or a BS detector, um, red lights should have been going off. What does that mean? Like the term AI agent is such a it's such a broad term, right? And it lacks any specificity, and that's intentional because quite clearly there's a spectrum of what AI agents is, and a lot of the time we were just calling something an AI agent when actually it was just a workflow. And there is such a massive difference between a series of automated processes and true artificial intelligence and agentic AI. So I think it's probably useful if we kind of have a quick discussion around what is an AI agent and what does it do. And I suppose my take on it would be an AI agent is a essentially a piece of software that is capable of autonomous decision making with context. So it's not just a series of automated processes, but it's an AI agent is capable of pulling in data, analyzing that data, and then making a decision to act based on an understanding of that data, and that is what we mean by a agentic workflow. And so, to give an example, I suppose a good example that we would always refer to on a podcast, and to keep it practical for our listeners, if you're running a business today and you get an inbound email, um, if you would then immediately fire out the same email that you send to every customer, and that's an automated workflow, that is not an AI agent. That is a workflow, that is an automation. However, if that AI agent is able to receive the customer's email, understand the customer's email, then go to their website and research on that business, understand their business model, and then send a personalized email based on an understanding of the products and services that you offer as a business, okay, fine. That's an AI agent. That is an agentic workflow because it's a tool that is capable of making an autonomous decision based on context and nuance and understanding. But broadly speaking, I think it's true. I think no one, still to this point, no one knows what an AI agent is. But I'd be curious to get your take on this overall topic.
I totally get why no one knows what an AI agent is, because once you put agent in front of a word that resembles a field that is so broad and it's like a huge umbrella of many, many things. So AI is still not a very defined term, right? AI can mean deep neural networks, huge language models, but it can also mean simple things, right? Like just clustering your data and putting your data in order and cleaning it, right? AI is a huge umbrella, and putting agent in front of it only makes things even more ambiguous.
Yeah.
So I'm not very surprised that people haven't yet reached a consensus of what an AI agent is. But if we look back at what an intelligent system is, and I do not remember the word-by-word description from university, but it's something like it's a system that changes its way of behaving based on a set metric when it's exposed to some data or, let's say, outside context. And I think this is a good definition to start with when we talk about agents. You gave a very good example. If you have a simple workflow that at 8 a.m. every morning sends 10 emails, come on, that's not an AI agent, right? That's a nice automation. That's a nice use of software. However, if that agent reads the news, researches a person who's about to send an email to, makes sense of that information and crafts a personalized email every morning that goes out to a very targeted person, here we can talk about intelligence because the agent changed its behavior based on the context it's been exposed to. So I think we have to draw a clear line between simple automation and AI agents.
Yeah.
However, there's still a ton of room of discussion of, even in the land of intelligence, what's an AI agent, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you mentioned this is intentional, left ambiguous, and I'm happy with it, right? People define their own definitions of AI agents, define their own frameworks of how these agents interact with each other, and it's fine. This is how we see innovation, and this is how we reach a common consensus of what this field is about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it got me thinking about the topic generally, like what is an AI agent? And clearly no one knows. But it got me thinking about, okay, well, what do we know? What do we know about AI agents? And what is clear and what is there a consensus on? And I think the clear thing that we've gained a consensus on over the last couple of weeks was nicely captured in an interview that the CEO of LangChain did. So Harrison Chase, anyone that doesn't know what LangChain is, essentially they've built a framework for the development of LLM applications and LLM automations. And so when we talk about AI agents, a number of enterprise companies that are building AI agents today, and I should stress we're probably like 1% into the adoption curve of true AI agents. But the companies that are building these AI agents, they're tech companies, right? So Replit have just come out with their own AI agent tool. Klarna have come out with their own AI agent tool, and they're all using LangChain under the hood to actually develop these tools. And his point of view was pretty clear here in that, okay, no one knows what an AI agent is yet, but for the few companies that are rolling out AI agents, they're doing so with development teams. So it's developers that are actually building the AI agents. So we're not yet at a point where non-tech users are developing AI agents. The HR team aren't rolling out a HR agent. The marketing team aren't rolling out a marketing agent. These are development teams that are actually building these LLM tools and these AI agents from scratch. So I thought that was quite an interesting take from Harrison there.
And I think we have to make a distinction here between no code and full code creation of AI agents. Of course, we'll reach a future, if not, we're already there with tools like Relevance AI that allow, as you said, let's say HR people build a workflow that summarizes the application that they receive, this kind of things. And they might work. You might be able to get some small, intelligent automations built by non-tech people. However, I think we need to again stress the importance of hiring people, especially in the AI space, that know what they're doing. Because going back to your point of software engineering teams building AI agents, it makes a lot of sense for me because once you try to achieve greatness with an agentic workflow, you need to understand very well what each component does. And you need to understand when things don't go as planned, how to correct that, and what exactly led to the system not behaving as you expected. So, of course, non-tech people will be able to create very simple things. If you want the real deal, if you want to build the next big thing with AI agents, you still need humans and engineers that know what happens behind in the loop.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Well, we talked about AI agents, but I feel like even after 4 podcasts where we talked in each about AI agents, still no one knows what the hell an AI agent is. So what should people do?
Well, I mean, I think the only reasonable conclusion is that you're just going to have to tune into episode 5 of the Generation AI podcast this time next week. So we'll see you then, and hopefully by then we'll know what an AI agent is, right?
Yeah, great idea. We'll catch up next week.